Good morning. It is February 21st. This is our second negotiation meeting to develop a professional negotiated agreement for the upcoming 24-25 school year. I believe our agenda today is to spend 2 minutes just reviewing that we have a agreed upon collective commitment for the negotiations procedure, and then Amber and I can get that signed during a break. And then today the focus is NEA-Shawnee missions issue regarding temporary leave. So we'll let them introduce that. We have a homework assignment completed on gathering some historical data on usage of temporary leave days that Dr. Jeremy Higgins is here and available to share with us. And then we'll just try and continue walking through the process, facilitating ourselves as best we can because we do not have a facilitator here today. Do we want to plan to take our first break at like 9:30?
Yes.
In an hour? Yeah. I know Stephanie always gets those on the schedule, so okay, we can plan a break at 9:30. Just a bit of housekeeping. I do want to share with the team, as everyone now knows, Dr. Schumacher is our named superintendent, which is very exciting news. And we historically have not had either a superintendent, an interim superintendent, a named superintendent serve on the team, similarly to how the association has not had its president typically serve on the team. And so I wanted to let everybody here know that the board will take official action to appoint Dr. Higgins as a representative to the team at our next meeting. Because that official action hasn't been taken yet, he's just going to be 1 foot in, 1 foot out if everyone's comfortable with that. But you'll see that on the agenda for the upcoming board meeting. We do not anticipate any further changes to our team, and I'm very sorry for the shuffling we've had this year. When you have turnover in administration, we always talk about the cards sort of falling one after the other, and that's sort of what has happened in Shawnee Mission, but we're very excited for all of our new leaders. So we, going to our collective commitment on the negotiations procedure, we went through the full and complete IBB process on that at our last meeting. I was assigned the homework of going through and trying to reflect our agreement in a collective commitment that was updated for this year. I told you guys that sometimes I'm really critical of my own writing, and I saw a couple places where I was like, I think if we just untie this to any specific contract year, then less revision may be required to the extent that we want to do this collective commitment in future negotiation years. So a lot of my revisions were just to untie it to any specific year. But then also to reflect our agreements that we made for this year in terms of the procedure that we're going to use. So as homework, everyone reviewed it. I heard back from Amber that everyone was comfortable with it, and so we will go ahead and Amber and I will sign that during a break. I'll put the final PDF in our shared folder, and then we have in the past linked to that in our joint statement that went out. So I will plan to do that again when I prepare a joint statement after our meeting today. Cool. Any questions or comments? Okay, I'm going to surrender the floor finally and let the association and your representatives go ahead and start talking us through your issue.
Okay, so our issue was issue statement 2. Do the current temporary leave provisions meet the needs of our professional employees, and are they competitive with surrounding districts? So right now, when people, especially new teachers, new to the profession, first-year teachers, those first couple years, especially with COVID, right now, a lot of them are using up those 10 days pretty quickly, and then they're being charged their daily rate, which is obviously very difficult when it's your first couple years teaching to have that taken out. So and not just that, but also we're seeing a lot of people in the bargaining unit who are unable to have surgeries due to the lack of days that they have built up, which is difficult to hear that you have to put off a surgery, which is like something that is medically necessary, and you have to put that off because of your job because you don't have the days. And so what we are looking to do is to add at least maybe 3 to 5 days to that, because that would help people to be able to have those days and not use not have to cut into their daily rate. We also feel like it would be competitive with other districts because other districts have about 13 to 17 days that they have. So I also think with the increased, it's important for people to be able to take mental health days with kind of what's going on in schools. And so adding that 3 to 5 days would be helpful for our bargaining unit. With that, can we kind of hear like how his report?
So, one thing we talked about doing as homework is getting some historical data on professional employees' use of their temporary leave days. I think just how many days they're using each year is that. And so if we want, Dr. Higgins, if you want to come up and find a mic and maybe share with us, and I don't know if you have anything that you want to cast, but we have that ability in this room.
And if you open up the Google Doc that we have for this issue statement, I am typing in focus, interests, and possible solutions.
Thank you.
So I will share with you guys that the data I have is very limited, at least as of right now. And if additional information is needed from the group, I'll do my best to track it down. So I want to show you what I have and what I was able to get, and that is on the screen. And so what this is, what you'll see is a comparison of first semester last year to first semester this year. Sorry about that, Clayton. So comparison of first semester last year to first semester this year. As you guys are all aware, obviously there was a change in the P&A last year that related to the what teachers were paid back for unused days. And so we were really interested in seeing if that had an impact on teachers using their days, not using their days, what that impact could be. Obviously, we have very limited data sample. We have one semester. So what you see the data up there, right? So from first semester last year, there were 9,643 illness-related absences. This semester, or first semester this year, 9,140. So obviously a decrease. Personal days, you can see that there was a decrease from last year to this year as well. A couple of things that I want to, I guess, caveat about this data. There is no long-term absence data in here. So this is just people putting in illness for a day or two or whatever the case may be, short-term, and for taking a personal day. So no long-term absences are in here. There's also no vacancy related absence data in here. So if a position had gone unfilled and there was a long-term sub in there, that data is not being reflected as well. I guess that was our best shot at trying to be able to compare last year absence to this year absence. Obviously, I like that the numbers have gone down. What's the reason for that? I have no idea, right? Is the $75 buyback incentivizing people to save some of their days? Maybe. Or maybe people are just more healthy this year. I have no idea. So I have asked our business office for some additional historical data on, because I believe at the end of each year they track how many days are within leave balances for each employee to see what those look like. I didn't get that now because not at the end of the year, and so we don't have that data. But I would be interested in what does the average number of days in a person's bank, what does that look like historically, and how has that trended? So, questions for me and or requests for anything that could help the team at future meetings in relation to this.
Okay, I have a lot of questions. I want to spend some time diving into a little bit I know Stephanie would say, why is it important that we are competitive with other districts, and make us talk about that and go through that. But first, just in terms of the data, can we look at specific school districts? Like, can we like spend some time pulling up like Olathe, like who we tend to compare with and who we're competing with in the job market? I mean, that would be Olathe, Blue Valley. We typically look at KCK. Like, we pretty much are looking at Johnson County districts, right?
Are you asking
wanting
about
what
their
they're-
leave, like
Yes.
what their leave policies
Yeah,
are?
we have that.
We have that already.
Yeah, we got it.
Do you have it in the folder?
It's
No,
not.
we
Oh, I can type it in here
Okay.
in the interest section.
I think that would be helpful to look at. And also, if anyone could share, I was not on the negotiations team at this point in time, but my understanding is that at some point, Shawnee Mission, what I would call modernizing its leave policy. It modernized its leave policy so that there is temporary leave days are leave days. So I know that we divide these between illness and personal for coding purposes, but my understanding is that in Shawnee Mission, we use the phrase a leave day is a leave day, which means that your supervisor is never going to ask you for a doctor's note, right? And so I think that it's important to know that typically with modernized leave policies, you sometimes do see a reduction in the number of days. So I'd be interested to know for these other districts if they have a division between, their definition of a leave day. Is illness?
We already
separate?
have that,
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want us to share that on the screen?
Yes, please.
Do I need to bounce off?
This is 2041.
43.
There it goes. Wasn't popping up at first. Let me make it bigger. Doesn't make it very much. Okay, so this is what Shawnee Mission currently has, 10. And then Olathe has 13 illness/bereavement days, plus if they had 2 personal days for 1 to 10 years of experience, 3 for if they have 11 to 15 years of experience, and this is every year, and then 4 extra days if they have 16 or more years of experience. So the more experience they have, the more days they receive each year. So everybody gets 13.
And you said that includes
Illness and bereavement,
illness and bereavement?
and then they get 2 personal, so they get 15.
So they get 15 just right off the bat.
Yes,
So, but they have illness and bereavement. So to be fair, Shawnee Mission has, if we count bereavement, 13 days.
Yes.
but they could use
Depending on
13
someone dying.
illness.
They
So
could use 13 illness.
They could use 13
Okay.
illness, so
Yes.
it's not like,
Okay.
and then they get an additional 2 personal, so they get 15 total
Okay.
for the year, or up to 17.
Okay.
Depending on how long they've been.
And is their illness divided? Like, do they have to, is it possible that their supervisor could come to them and say, my understanding is that you were at Disney World on Friday and not sick. I need a sick note.
Or do they have to ask permission to take a personal
Yeah.
day?
That
I
would-
believe, I think it's with the personal that are added extra. Yes. But I don't think the illness counts.
Yeah, I think if they're sick, they just put in a sick day.
Okay.
And then, go ahead.
So we think, but we're not sure that if they're sick, they put in a day, they have to schedule personal.
I can look it up real quick.
Okay. And my guess is that there may be some different, I mean, I think it would be helpful to go to a source there, perhaps even in human resources or leadership there, and say, in practice, what are you actually doing? Okay.
And then Blue Valley gets 13 illness/personal.
So no differentiation, or they can put in all personal, all illness, okay?
KCK gets 10 illness, so you get 10 sick days plus an additional 2 personal days. Those personal days you do have to ask for ahead of time, and you have to have approval for that, for those 2 personal days. And then if you don't use them, they roll over into sick days.
If you don't use, it rolls over
Yeah.
to sick. So they're somewhat limited, okay?
Mhm.
Okay, DeSoto is 8 discretionary. They can use it for whatever they need. And then 4 personal. 12 total.
Okay,
Gardner gets the same, 10 illness, personal. Also
Okay.
a smaller district, though. Turner has 10.
okay,
Piper's 15. Lawrence has 12.
thank you for doing that homework.
Yeah.
And then also Olathe has a sick bank that's managed by NEA in the district, and so does KCK. So the 2 bigger districts, so how that works is that when you start working in the district, you can offer to put some of your days, at least 1 or 2 of your days, into a bank, and then that way you could access that bank if you were to go over your sick or personal days.
Okay,
And then that's, like I said, managed between NEA and the district. Like, they sit down and they look at it a case-by-case basis
okay.
and decide.
And just, I know everyone at this table knows, but in terms of our 10 days and scheduling that, someone just walk me through what that looks like if you're a teacher in Shawnee Mission. So if you're sick,
You just go
You
into
just
ASAP.
go into frontline
Yeah.
and put it in as a day.
Yeah.
okay? And if you want to take a personal day,
Just go
Same
into,
thing.
same thing, just you file it under personal.
and it does not require supervisor approval?
No.
Our days are our days.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so that's helpful, I think, to look at the other districts and see comparatively. The other question that I think we would need to potentially ask, and there's probably not that much difference, but how many contract days do each of these districts have? And what is the length of their contract day? Because, I mean, at some point, there is, the more day, I mean, obviously, if you're an administrator on 230 or 260-day contract, you get more leave days. So there is, now, I don't know when we're talking about the numbers that we're talking about, that contract lengths that are,
Do our administrators get the same amount of days as us, or do they get more?
I don't know.
Because in KCK, administrators are on the same as teachers, so they get 10 sick
So
personal.
they get more,
Right,
but they get more, so essentially teachers get 1 day per month. They work 10 months, they
Right.
get 1 day per month.
right.
Administrators get 1 day per month. They work 11 months, they get 11 days.
Oh, okay.
So
That's fair.
that's essentially it.
And they also are subject to the non-use day calendar. So just wondering, is there, it'd be helpful to know the length of the contract for these other districts. It's probably within days, but,
Olathe has 187.
Yeah.
okay.
And how long is their school day?
I believe Olathe's changing their hours next year.
They are, I don't know the exact.
I don't think, because they used to have longer school days than us. But I believe now are they the same now?
Are they the same elementary and secondary? Like their contract day length?
I think so.
I don't know if it's appropriate for me to speak or not on behalf of this. You guys tell me. I can speak to a couple things
I
on
don't
Blue
mind.
Valley and Olathe because
Okay.
I know Blue Valley and Olathe. So Olathe, as I'm looking at their negotiated agreement, if you want to take a personal day, you have to request that 2 days in advance.
Yep.
They also limit the number of personal days that they allow throughout the school year. They can essentially shut them down, so you can't take personal days, and they have a percentage that they have on those. So that's in Olathe. Blue Valley, I believe it's 5 days in advance you have to request a personal day. They too have the ability to shut down personal days as well. So,
What does that mean?
So
shut
like the
down?
day after the Super Bowl, there is no personal leave. Or if they have high needs absences, there is no personal leave. Olathe has it in their contract. Beginning April 1st, personal leave is limited to 7% of the licensed certified staff at elementary and middle school and 3% at any of the high schools. So
Olathe or Blue Valley, they could say, we've already had X number of teachers scheduled personal days, so your request is denied.
Correct.
Based on that.
That's correct.
And that's just for sub-coverage management, I'm guessing. Okay. So we were talking about the number of contract days. Olathe matches us with 187, and we think that their contract length is the same as ours across all grade levels. Okay. I'm guessing they're all very close,
I was
but
gonna say, yeah, most
I just
likely.
think that it's good to know because I'm just asking questions. I'm trying to look up Piper right now because they have a large number of days. And I'm just curious. So Piper has 184 days.
I wonder if all of their contracts, as you said, are the same amount as, you know, in Shawnee Mission Elementary is 20 minutes shorter a day.
Yep.
So I wonder.
I think it's helpful to know contract day and length. Again, when you're adding up over the course of a year, it
Sure.
can be a lot of minutes. I mean, I know that for personal experience, probably day to day, a day is a day, you know. Okay, let's see. I do think we need to know Blue Valley contract days and KCK at least. I'm curious.
I have Lawrence up. They're 186.
Lawrence is 186. Okay.
I'm trying to find KCKs. I'm on the struggle bus. Oh, 186. There we go.
Is KCK?
Yes.
Okay.
It looks like Blue Valley's length of day is 7 hours and 45 minutes.
Okay. Across all grade levels, you think?
Mm-hmm.
So they're okay. I'm trying to look up their number of contract days.
It's on page 29, supposedly. Yep.
$186 looks like in Blue Valley. I personally think, like, just from like a human resources perspective, the issue of, you know, leave days and managing it is like, it's very interesting. And I think that you're seeing a lot of industries significantly change how they handle and manage and assign leave as a benefit. And different professions have different challenges with that. There are industries that don't even have a set number of leave days anymore, which again, I think is really interesting from just like an academic human resources, employment law, standpoint, my husband's a software engineer and he hasn't had a specific number of leave days in the past decade. He just takes leave when he needs to take leave. Obviously, we all work in an industry where we provide, direct instruction, supervision, care to our clients, essentially, right? Like there are some practical limitations, and the thing about being a teacher, of course, is that if you're not there, somebody has to be, and so we have to figure out how to manage that. I just, again, I think it's interesting, and I think we are seeing a lot of changes, and by the time we have children in different professions, they may think the way that we did things was totally dinosaur. Like, it's interesting. And I do think as we get into joint interests, obviously we all want people to have, the days that they need to take care of themselves if they are ill and their personal needs. On the other side of that, I know that, there's an impact to students, coworkers, and there's a budgetary component to leave days as well. One thing I wanted to hear from our principals and from Dr. Higgins on, if everyone will allow them to just share some feedback, is as a building leader, as a district leader, what is helpful to you in terms of managing leave? So some of these districts, there's administrator involvement in like approving or denying. Some of them have advance notice. So I'm interested in, like, as a leader, do you want any of that? Is it better if you just don't? Is it helpful if you have some ability to limit? What level of control is helpful to you in managing your building, if any?
I would just say, I think we've talked for the last several years about the farther advance notice that we have on leave, the greater the likelihood to be able to get a sub. And so I think that's always beneficial, but with illnesses, that's not always possible.
Where some of them, they have to have advance notice and approval. As a principal, I feel like sometimes maybe you would be getting into, muddied waters when, and then
That would be my concern.
Yeah, and then, I think, of course, the advance notice is always helpful. But I would, because I've seen both sides of it where people use all of their days because that's what they do every year. And I've heard conversations like that. And then, some people are rarely gone, so.
Is there already data somewhere that shows how far in advance people are putting in leave? Can we look at that at some point too?
Yes.
Just to see, essentially where I'm going, is that a problem in our district right now is where I'm going with that.
I feel like we would hear more about it.
Yeah, I would like to, yes, it would be helpful to know how far in advance people are logging that, because if you're sick, I assume many times it's very late in the night, in the morning, you're trying to decide, can you go, can you not go, and those cannot be helped. But for personal days specifically, how far in advance are people doing it? And so I think we need to start making a list of additional information this team needs. Because again, if you have, if we look at these other districts, there may be, from the administration, hey, it's really helpful if you have to put in a personal day. Well, do we have a mechanism for doing that, or is that more homework on the principal, right? Where they're going to say, oh, it's less than 48 hours, you don't get your leave day. It would be helpful to know how far in advance are people putting in personal leave, and do we have a mechanism where our system could just not allow it, right? Because I would hate to create any
As
more.
of right now, we don't.
We don't.
Because our
Okay.
days are our days. So,
Right.
and I'm, yeah.
Yeah, and there, I mean, to speak to that, there's even situation, I mean, we have blockout days, right?
Yes.
And people can put in a personal day on a blockout day.
Oh, they
The
could, yes.
Frontline
And then
does not,
somebody
we
has to-
can't lock it out, and then they're deducted pay.
Yeah.
So, there isn't a mechanism to do
Okay,
that.
that's helpful to know. So just from a data or knowledge standpoint, if we were to build in anything like, you know, for personal days, you have to request them X days in advance, that would be an administrative work piece that would have to be done. Okay?
Yeah, the system we have right now is definitely very flexible for our employees.
Yes.
I mean,
which is excellent. for
which is awesome.
recruitment and retention.
100%.
100%.
100%.
And I think it makes it unbiased. Like, I don't
Yes.
think a principal deciding if someone should take a personal day.
There's just too
Would-
many factors
Right.
that I struggle with in that.
Yes.
Well, and then you have people, if they're denied that personal day, they're just gonna take it as an illness.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
I mean,
Right.
you're gonna run into
Mhm.
those, which in KCK happens more often than not. Cause it's like, okay, I tried to take it, you said no, well, now I'm sick.
Speaking from an HR perspective, you know, there are people who ask to be able to use personal leave on a blockout day, and just managing that process is difficult. And we have specified language within the P&A that we use, and it's still a difficult process. I would also say from an HR lens, one thing that we see is some of our employees, as we've noticed, just use their days, and they have no days. And then, you know, 3 or 4 years down the road, something happens, and they have to have a surgery, or they want to start a family, and they're like, what do you mean I don't get paid for these?
Yeah.
Well, it's because there's no leave, you have no leave built up. So that is I think, it's something that we see as well.
Yeah.
Is
I know
poor
we talked-
management, just poor management of your days.
I think it's just a
On-
lack
It's
of
hard for new,
ed-
it's hard for new
education.
teachers, especially like just
Yeah.
this year with the back and forth on COVID guidelines and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the teachers I work with, it's her first year, and she had to be out for 5 days. That automatically took half of her sick leave for the
Mm-hmm.
entire year
Yeah.
because she was told she needed to stay home during that time. Which now we've kind of gotten away from that, so we're not like making you take those days, but. Our baby teachers are running out of days faster.
Mm-hmm.
They're not either because they're in a new environment, they're around all the germs that they're not used to. Their
Mm-hmm.
immune systems aren't built up yet. So, and then just learning that
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna have to be a little more conservative with those as opposed to not. That's
Mm-hmm.
it's a hard lesson
And-
to learn those first 3 years.
In terms of absence data, so, and this was as of last week. So here's the breakdown of all of our absences across the district. 17% of absences were entered with 0 days notice, so like same
That's not
day.
bad.
And that includes sick.
Just personal and sick, or just
This is everything.
okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
this is everything.
Cool.
42% were given with 1 day notice. 15% 2 days notice.
How much was that?
2 days notice.
Well, I'm sorry, what was
15.
15%.
14% with 3 days. 12% with 4 days. Days that were, so of that 17% that were entered the same day, 67% of those absences come between 4 a.m. and 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the data I have access to.
What would you say is like, if I can at least get this much days notice, I have a good chance at getting a
Good,
sub.
good question. So
I was gonna say, what year do we have a fill rate?
fill rate by time entered. So if entered the same day, there's a 67% fill rate, which is actually pretty
I was gonna say, that's
pretty
not bad.
remarkable.
Yeah.
That's really
It
high,
speaks
actually.
to our partnership with Kelly.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's really good. If you give 1 day notice, that jumps to 87%.
Okay.
And then it's above that the
Right.
longer you get. So 93% and above for 2 days and beyond. So, I mean, if you give 1 day notice, you have an
Yeah.
87% chance of getting a sub.
That's not bad.
That's really good.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And usually if those longer ones out there, you connected with that sub to
Right.
get the date.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Well, and that fill rate, does that count, so for building subs, does that count as that, or does it not because we have to we put no sub if the building subs?
Yeah, I'm not sure
Sorry, I
that
know
the
that's a
building
gray
sub,
area,
yeah,
but
right.
I just didn't know if we had.
I'm not sure that the building sub gets played into that.
I would guess it does, because I know we're supposed to mark that no subs needed.
Yeah, but a lot of time that happens on the back end, not ahead of time.
Right,
So
so that's
I don't know 100%.
That's okay, I was just asking. I know the building subs and the fill rates have
Yeah.
been
And those
it's a new
building subs
thing.
definitely help.
Yeah,
No doubt about
absolutely,
that.
Oh my
absolutely.
goodness, yes.
I'm really impressed with the fill rates.
So it seems like if we're highly summarizing this, 1 day notice is very helpful.
Yes,
Okay.
and with only 17% giving no days, that's not terrible. For a district of our size, I would say that's probably not really terrible at all.
No.
Like, I would actually have thought it would probably have been higher.
Especially when you
Good.
factor in that's illness as
Yeah.
well.
Right.
Especially with all the germs
Yeah.
going around right now.
I want to ask about bereavement leave and if we have data on that. So I just pulled up our agreement, and we have a provision that says that you may take up to 3 days per year for the death of an immediate family member, which includes wife, husband, father, mother, stepfather, stepmother, daughter, son, daughter-in-law, son-in-law, siblings, parents, uncles, aunts, nieces, and nephews.
And I believe we had another question about.
Yeah, we.
Yes, in terms of if a woman would have a miscarriage. I know that's a heavy topic,
Yes,
but
we'd
yeah.
like to have that added.
We were looking to potentially add language around that.
Yes, we would.
Have we had anyone ask that question before?
I haven't, but
I haven't personally.
Okay.
Ask if it would count towards
As
bereavement.
bereavement,
We just,
yeah.
we would like to have that language added so that it could not be denied.
Okay, let me ask you how bereavement leave works. How does it work? How does someone take bereavement leave?
They put in bereavement.
I'd say, yeah,
They just put it in.
just put it in?
I've notified my admin, cause more often than not, and again, I'm just my own experience, I've been able to have a couple of days to be like, hey, I need to go. I haven't been the one making arrangements, I've just had to go and attend. So I give my admin a couple of days notice, I put in for the bereavement depending on how far away it is, and
Okay.
yep.
We don't have a process to manage bereavement at the HR level. I would assume that happens at the building level. I know when I was a building principal, we were pretty in tune with our staff, and if someone was, if someone had passed. We do get questions on occasion in regards to how do I code this, or it's over a blockout date, how do I handle that? So we do get those questions that we assist with, but I would say a number of the bereavement, they work with their building principals on.
Well, and they just mark it in frontline as
Correct.
bereavement.
And bereavement, I mean, and there is two different
Immediate,
options. There's
yes.
immediate and other. So I would hope that if employees have questions, they go to their principal and ask those questions of them first, and then they can always come to us if they need additional support.
What are problems we have, if any, with our current bereavement provision? Is it working? Is it not working? I know we mentioned that maybe it's not encompassing enough. It does not include loss of a unborn child.
That was the only, as we were looking over it, that was the only thing that we could potentially look to update.
Yeah, because people didn't know if they should take bereavement or sick leave for that.
Yeah. And then that takes out, if an employee was going to a principal on that, a call that principal is going to have to make. Or not a call, but a decision that's going to have to be made.
And that way we could just code it that way. And personally, depending on how late, how far that has gone, depends on how you're going to recover. And speaking as someone who's had to go through that, I used at least 6 days afterwards. Also, just mentally, I was not okay. So not having to have used those days would have been fantastic. To then come back having with just a few more, that would have been nice. But that's
Recognize
also
my question is a philosophical and maybe a political question, but would that not fall under the death of a son or daughter?
since we
Well,
don't
that's
have
kind
a
of-
definitive definition on that, I don't know that we can answer that.
Yeah.
Which is why I don't know if we can even add that.
That's why I was
Like, I don't know
asking
if we
if
can
we have
add that
anyone
language.
who's
I don't know if that would
historically-
be a admin call. I don't know. But that was the only,
And that's kind of like, we don't want the administrator having to make that
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's
philosophical,
not fair.
political
Yeah.
decision.
Okay.
I think I did see that in maybe Olathe's as part of their bereavement.
Yeah, I think that they added that last year, I feel like,
Oh no.
under the bereavement.
Now I need to
Okay.
figure out which one I'm on. If I could spell. And I cannot. This
From, do we have any concerns at all? Because that's, again, something that's not, with bereavement, a leave day is not a leave day in our policy, right? You have to have a specific reason. Theoretically, although I doubt it never happens, we could say we need proof that you have used these days for this purpose, right? That you've traveled, that you've attended a service, that you've traveled back, like we could ask for those things. Is there any concern with having a portion of leave days that it's not leave is the leave day? Is there any concern that there's potential for abuse? There's potential for unfairness, that people, you've got someone who never uses it, you've got somebody who somehow has a cousin or an uncle die every year. Is that am I making that up or
Do we have can you only take bereavement once? That's not accurate.
You can take it every time.
because you can take it multiple times a year?
Yes.
It's not just 3 per year.
Yeah, so it's not just 3
No,
per
that's
year.
per
it's
No,
death.
it's 3
depending
per
on-
an occurrence.
Okay.
So some years you might not use it, and some years
I was gonna say,
unfortunately you might
I've-
use a lot.
Yeah.
But there's no limit as far as
There's no limit. Okay.
Jeremy, is that accurate?
I would have to read the language,
Yeah.
to be honest.
No,
with you.
I'm not seeing it as I pull it up. It just says you can take 3 days.
Yeah,
Per
so I would say that would
occurrence.
be any
Yeah.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Don't know how you could cap that. Like, you
Again,
can't have
I'm
more than 3
thinking
people
of
die
this,
per year.
again,
How
not
dare you.
specific to Shawnee Mission, but again, is just this purely this trend on leave days where days are not divided and your days are your days and you don't need to talk about why, you don't need to tell anyone why. We don't have that extending to bereavement, so I just think it's a point of just, like, I'm purely just asking the questions, like, is it something that we would think about, talk about? Is it working? Is it not working?
I would assume what we're doing is working unless, I mean, it's red flagged by anyone, which I'm not sure. I don't have consistent people coming up to me being like, hey, there's been a death. Like, that's not a consistent thing that,
I usually have the
Well-
question once a year.
as I say, yeah, it's not.
I mean, more of like, is it, I mean, and probably not because it's such a big life event, but like, is it because it's different and in theory you would have to go to your supervisor and say, this person in my life has passed away, or potentially even I've lost a son or a daughter because I've had a miscarriage. Is it better not to have it differentiated so that you can just say I'm taking these days, or is it you really would be explaining anyway? Does that make sense? Like,
Well, I feel like for teachers and stuff, I mean, I feel like teachers make those relationships with each other within their building, and I would hope that they would feel comfortable enough going to an admin to talk about it. I mean,
and that's not something that's ever been a conversation issue with you and your staff. Okay. Going back to the list of additional information we need, it looks like we've answered the question. I had a bullet of how far in advance are we putting in, and we have that data. I do think it would be helpful to know, on average, how many days a professional employee has banked based on years in the district.
yeah, that would be good info, yeah.
So
Also,
I'm
would-
assigning that to Dr. Higgins.
Yep.
For his first minute official meeting.
and also the cost of adding the additional days.
Yeah. We will, that absolutely will have a cost component. We're talking about our largest employee group.
Right.
Can we also get then the cost savings? And I know this is probably a lot that we're now asking potentially Russ for.
Sorry.
But when we're taking less leave, there's a cost savings
Yeah.
Taking less days, there's a cost saving.
because we're not paying
We're not
for
paying
a
the
sub.
subs.
Oh, you mean
So
when
when
you
the
do the
earlier-
$75 per day option
No,
versus?
like the district saves money by not using those subs, by
Yes.
not having to pay said subs. And
So if
we're
we've
not
used
selling
500
our-
less
yeah,
subs
if
this
we're not
year, it's
selling our days
500
back,
times
the district
Whatever
will
that
cost
daily
us
sub
money.
rate minus potentially $75 per day.
Yeah.
But there
Oh.
still is a savings somewhere in there,
Right.
so we also need to look at that.
Be a little bit difficult to figure out, but I see what you're saying. What about additional information, data?
Well, another solution could be having a leave bank that's managed by NEA in the district. So what would we need? Like, what would be, I don't think we'd have to pay. I think those are volunteer positions that someone comes and meets. But like, I think the reason why I was thinking of that is because we have a lot of people that are retiring and then they're using all their days every Friday because they don't want to lose those days. Whereas we could put that towards a bank, like they could put those days to a bank and they would not have to worry about having to spend all those days before they retire.
Before we get to solutions, should we finish talking about interests, like
Thank you.
what, the why?
So, okay, so a couple interests that I jotted down just as we were going through the discussion is I heard from our elementary administrator rep, I would feel the same way personally as a supervisor, that I don't want to have a lot of discretion or muddy waters or, you know, you're my favorite teacher, so sure, you get all your days, and no, you don't get any. I think that we want to, and I'm a huge proponent of this from a legal perspective, there needs to be no room to treat anyone differently.
For sure.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
and from a moral perspective.
Yeah,
Not
it
just
keeps it
legal.
open for the teachers too. So like, if you, and again, most of our people are putting in 1+ days notice. You're only having a small percentage of our pool not do that, and I would hope that's probably due to illness. So, leaving that open for teachers to be able to be like, I need a mental health day or whatever else may occur is nice. So.
So the other bullet point I had written down is just minimal management time. So we don't want to do anything that creates a bunch of work at the
Right.
administrative level. Anything that makes the leave process more burdensome on the management side. So obviously we are going to have significantly more interest in that. That's just what I collected as through our
Yeah.
discussion. So what else?
John, do you have anything else over there on your notes?
No, I got everything.
Okay.
So I mean, again, as an employee, right? Like the more leave days you have, the better.
Absolutely.
Right. So I mean, if I'm negotiating a contract, I'm going to be like, I want as many leave days
I
as
want all the leave.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
unlimited
wanna-
PTO, please. Thank you.
And done.
In another year, didn't we talk about, going back to what Dr. Higgins said about having, you know, people run out of days each year? We talked about they had to have a certain amount of days banked.
Yeah, we did mention that last
For,
year.
for, was it buyback?
Yeah.
It was.
Or
So
Yeah.
I believe in previous PNAs, there was, you had to have a minimum of 50 days in order to apply for that buyback. I believe that maybe a couple years ago, that provision, that 50 went away. So, yeah, you could have a first-year teacher who doesn't use any days but sells all 10 of their days.
Yeah, every year.
And then you're in the same situation.
Yeah.
And again, from an HR perspective, we do see that, you know, people come to those life-changing events and they're a little shocked that they're like, what do you mean I don't get 6? Yes, you can take 6 weeks of leave, but you don't get paid for it because you don't have any days built up.
So I'm gonna put as an interest, we do not want teachers to run out of days and have dock days.
Yes.
Yes.
But as a possible solution or something to talk about is requiring you to have a certain number of days banked before you can do your $75 a day. And in the line of, leave days being beneficial, I would just add a note of, a healthy teachers. Having the ability to care for your children and your dependents if they are ill. And we're talking, again, I do want to remind everyone that we obviously have provisions and job protections available where longer term leave
Right.
is needed. So we're talking about the cold, the flu, the COVID, the
Right.
sniffles, that sort
Absolutely.
of thing.
Yep.
Do we know the number of employees that run out of 10 days a year?
Yeah, that would be good.
That's
Yeah.
data I'm gonna,
Okay.
that's part of my homework. I'll work with Allison and see what I can find, and see what I can get.
Do we feel like we need buyback data?
We don't have it yet.
Yeah, we're
'cause
waiting.
It just
Oh,
started.
we've just
Just
started,
increased it
okay.
last year.
Yeah, and she may have it from previous years,
Yeah.
like, that might be beneficial for us to see. I'll see what I can come up with. Rachel, piggybacking on what you said, again, from an HR perspective, the flexibility in the days that we have is a recruitment piece that Pam and I use when we are meeting with prospective employees. It's something we talk about, we mention. You don't have to ask to take a personal day. You can just take a day, as
Yeah.
long as it's not a blockout day.
Right.
And that is, it's certainly a piece.
It is a tool,
So.
yeah.
So retaining the flexibility in our leave days.
Mhm.
Again, my understanding is that is a more modern approach as well.
It is.
It hits on the interest of less management, less oversight, as well as avoiding any different treatment. And also, frankly, removes incentives to fraudulently, or I can't think of the
Yeah.
right word, but right, like
Yeah.
to make up your reason, right? Like we don't want to put incentives in to game the system.
Right.
So I'm gonna put that in, no incentives to game the system. And fairness, I would say too, goes along with that, like, you'll have people who will be 100% honest. And you have people who just have a different sort of code they live by and they don't, right? And so it's, everyone should get the same benefit. And it should be fair. I think. There was something else I had thought of. I mean, obviously the district's going to have an interest in affordability, right? And everyone is going to have a joint interest in, not having leave days impact classroom learning or coworker workload, which is sort of the same. A lot of these are the same things we've talked about when we talked about like late resignation. Like,
Right.
Anytime you're not there for any reason, we all know what those impacts are.
Right.
So negative impacts on students, on
Buildings, coworkers.
buildings and coworkers.
Yeah.
Let me think of other. Why don't we finish our interest list maybe, try and get that really generated and then take our break before we do solutions? I mean, this is where I think if Stephanie's gonna ask us, okay, you have competitiveness in your statement, why is it important to be competitive? So I'd be interested in hearing from everyone's perspective, how is that sold? So if you've got someone you're trying to recruit to Shawnee Mission, or HR is trying to recruit someone to Shawnee Mission, how is that? Where is that in the order of things that I consider as a potential employee?
I mean, it's probably not at the top of the list, but it
say it's
certainly
top 5 at
doesn't,
least.
it doesn't hurt. I mean, salary and benefits is gonna be number one. Culture and fit of the building and the position, district is probably up there higher. But again, it is something I bring up with every employee, how many
Yeah.
days they're gonna get, and the fact that we're
Your
very
days, yeah.
flexible in our approach on how those are able to be used.
So the days matter, but the flexibility also matters.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Okay.
Well, and I know it's a reason a lot of people stick around too. Like it's a good retention piece as well. Because if they go to these other districts, a lot of it's either illness or you have to get approval for those personal days.
Because they don't want to go back to a more old school system.
Right.
Agreed.
What else? What else are interests in leave? Certainly, certainly, at making sure people understand it. Oh, I know what I was going to say earlier. Complexity. I think we want as least complexity in the system as possible. I came from an industry where, in the legal industry, and a lot of times at law firms, I had no set leave days, but it was essentially zero days. Like you were not really allowed to take vacation. It was very stressful. And so then just from like coming here, it took me like 3 weeks talking to 7 people to even understand. Like, I was like, whoa, how do I log these? How do I use these? Was very confused, wanted to make sure I did not do anything that I wasn't supposed to do. So I think simplicity, and education are really helpful.
Right.
Because it's like if it's a benefit, you want to be able to access it without significant
For sure.
Yes.
barriers. Now that I'm here long enough, I think I understand how to do it, but any other interests? Let me ask the association, how did this issue come to be an issue statement for you guys? I know Amber introduced at the outset that you had some individuals come up to you and say, hey, with the addition of COVID now is to the list of potential short-term illnesses, I'm running out of days. I am putting off a surgery because I don't have enough days. A surgery would qualify you, of course, for job protected leave under FMLA, but I'm assuming they are wanting that time to be paid.
Well, and just so I came from KCK, so coming from KCK, if I don't use my days, then I have 12 that roll over into sick days because I get the 10 personal or the 10 illness and the 2 personal. So if I can go all year without getting sick, all of that gets banked as sick leave. So I have that opportunity there, whereas here it's 10, which granted, again, I have more of the flexibility of taking whatever I want, for the most part, but there's this sheer amount of, most of the surrounding districts seem to have either 10 or the larger ones seem to have at least 12. So more of just competitiveness when it comes to recruitment and retention.
Okay.
Yes.
So your experience in KCK was that people would roll over more because they had a limited ability to take personal days. And so unless they were...
Well, if the personal days don't get accepted, yeah, because those 2 days will roll
The
over
2
into
days.
sick leave.
So then if they had, several years of themselves being healthy and their dependents being healthy, then they were rolling those days over.
Yes.
I mean, I do think that's a challenge of a flexible system, is it requires more personal management,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Because it takes the limitations off and the management responsibility off, and it puts it on the employee
Absolutely.
to manage it appropriately, which I think emphasizes the importance of education at the outset, especially for those new teachers.
Well, and I feel like the new teachers figure it out pretty quick because sub-plans are not fun. Sub-plans are not fun. And they're a lot more complex sometimes than just being there.
Okay.
So once they take a couple of days at the last second when they're trying to scramble for sub-plans, I would feel like a lot of the new teachers kind of figure it out. Personally. I could be wrong.
How do you do, again? You have to remember, I have never worked inside of a school
Absolutely.
building.
Ask all of your questions.
How, and my I have many teacher friends, but they just don't talk about sub-plans. Do you get
It's not
those ready at the beginning of the school year? Is that the
Nope.
day
No,
of?
No,
It's
because
like-
you don't know where you're going to be. You don't know
Yeah.
what unit, what lesson, what you're doing.
I have a
So-
template that I
Yeah.
use that has the basics on there, But then beyond that, I have to go in and fill in the specifics.
Yeah, and I'm imagining elementary is probably more of like a hour by hour schedule, whereas high school is more of a block by block. Middle school is an hour by hour, depending on what they're doing
And I'm
that
at
day.
15 minutes.
Yes.
Then you
that's
have
what I was about to say.
And heaven
15
forbid you
over
have more than one
Yeah.
prep.
And
'Cause
a
then you
lot
got-
of explanation for someone else to teach her.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Or like
they
I
can
have
be pretty
videos
intensive.
for when I'm gone for the kids to watch. So
Yeah.
I can continue what I'm doing.
I mean, I took a half day today. My subplans were 2.5 pages single spaced.
Yeah, me too.
They're fairly
Okay.
extensive. It's not fun.
What is our current building sub situation, Dr. Higgins?
In terms of
How many we have?
building subs?
Yeah.
Every elementary has one. There's 3 elementaries that have 2. All of our middle schools have 2. All of our high schools have 2. So,
I asked that, and I don't know that we're gonna have a solution that goes here, but again, if personal days have to be approved, it can kind of be helpful to be like, sorry, building sub's already taken that day. You know, again, I don't know that we wanna go there, but,
It's like, then we'd only have 2, so only 2 people in that
Right.
building. Or
Or
one
one,
for some
or
which would be
elementary.
for a large building,
That-
it's
yeah,
not
that's
really
gonna be-
doable, but,
That'd be rough.
Yeah,
So
because you almost have teachers fighting over.
right.
Yeah.
No, you'd schedule out all your days at the beginning
You
of the
would.
year.
I
which
mean,
But speaking of so for our paperwork days, right? So SPED gets 4 paperwork days as of right now, and we have a whole document where you're supposed to potentially put in those days. I've multiple times had to be like, nope, not taking that day. I need to push that back to over here because of either something's going on or that just didn't fit right with when I thought I was going to take that day, or something else has come up, or we've gotten a move in. So even trying to pre-plan those days is rough.
Okay. I have some friends who are nurses. They have to put in their days like 6 months to a year in advance.
Yep.
So it's a concept for those professions that do have that face to, person to person. If I'm not here, there's no real sub for me type of position, but just something else to think about. Okay, do we want to take 12 minutes?
Yeah.
Between 10 and 15 and come back?
Yep. Let's do that.
Awesome. Back from our first break. I wanted just again to get a better sense, again, as we talk about leave, maybe more philosophically than concretely, and maybe it's helpful to talk about this in the absence of even having the data about bank days. But, talking in just an ideal world, if we got to draw it up, like how do we see leave? Do we see it as, an employment benefit? Do we see it as like, how much do you need? Is it something where you really want to have this extra so that days can be banked? Like where do we see it? And if we're trading it for money, how do we value it? Like if you, for example, and again, a lot of people are asking these questions, but would you, if you're valuing it as like a lever that has to be switched, is it something where you would put some pressure on the other to get more if you could choose between 2 different contracts? So just like philosophically, where do we see it in terms of what is the right amount and how do we value it?
I see it as a benefit in a lot of ways because if you bank your days, then you can use it for the future. If you buy them back in the future, there's already money there. It may not be for the same amount that like an increase in salary would be, but for the future, having those days if you had a surgery or if you were having a baby is very helpful. Like when we have 10 days, it's hard to bank up enough days to even go out and get paid for if you a maternity leave. So if we had 13, that would help. I mean, even if we were banking just 3 of those days, that helps. I mean, even if, I don't know if we'd want to, but if we're adding 3, then it would be easier to say you can't use, you have to bank, like we could implement, like you have to keep 3 days before you can bank other days. Does that kind of make
Yes.
sense? Like if we were adding days, then it would be easier to tell people you have to bank days.
I agree.
And I think that that's kind of what we need to do. I just don't think people understand that they are not thinking about the future. I think people who are just coming into the profession. And so I do think we have to somehow put in, you have to bank days. I just do not think that they understand like the concept of even like short-term disability or how our short-term disability works, because I think that's still very complicated to understand that you buy short-term disability and you think, oh, I'm going to use this, but you have to use up all your days before that, and then when you come back, all your days are gone. So either we have to do so much more educating to our new educators or people coming into this district about how days work, or we have to implement some way that we have to have them banking days. I don't think it's great for people to be stuck without days. Like, that just doesn't help your mental health. People just want to quit. I mean, they just want to kind of give up. So I don't think that helps either with like retention.
Well, and I don't necessarily, when I think of my days, I don't consider buyback, just because to me, it's not worth it. So I'm either going to I know.
That's what I was getting at. Do
Yeah.
you see it as compensation, or you see it, you know what
No.
I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
I
okay.
personally would rather use my days, like
Yeah.
not all of them, obviously, but like I'm not holding them so I can then sell them at the end of the year, at the
Right.
end of whenever, or heaven forbid I ever retire. Sell them at that point, like.
And I think that's hard too when you're new to the career. I remember when I was in my
Keep it
first
40
couple of
years.
years, it's like, oh, I have all these extra days. I can get some extra money. Like, I'm getting ready to start my master's. That'll go towards tuition, like a little bit. But I think that's hard for somebody new to understand as well when you're considering whether or not to sell back your days. You're thinking of the immediate benefit rather than the long term.
Thinking of the immediate benefit when you sell. Another philosophical question. How much do we want to incentivize people to use their days? These are yours, use them, take them. You need to take X number of days off per year to be a healthy, well-balanced person, versus how much do we want to incentivize to bank them for things, right? Like, where's that balance, do we think, between you need to take this number of days versus you need to be banking? Or again, how much of it do we want to say, that's on you, employee, you manage your own life?
How much do we want to micromanage at that point, I guess, would
Yeah.
be the next question. Because, like, you're going to have, the same ways you're going to have people that are going to take all their days and save all their days. You're going to have people that are not going to need those days, like, for that year or whatever. They're going to be healthy. They're going to be ready to show up every day and do what they need to do. And then you're going to have other people who just aren't going to be able to function that way. So I hesitate to be able to tell people they have to take a certain number, especially because then if we're trying to get them to bank it, if they bank it and it rolls over, then it is sick leave. So they're only getting the 10, like, once you use those 10, if you have anything banked, that is sick leave. You don't just get to use it as a personal day. So
I personally would think more education. Myself, I don't want to be micromanaged in my days.
right.
So I would rather just have more education, and then I knew these were my 10 days, and then I could take them if I wanted to.
However you wanted to.
If I didn't want
And I
to.
think when we're saying, when you have a system that requires, it's essentially use it or lose it system, right? Like, you take these days, they're not compensation, they're not to be bought back, you use it or you lose it. But then that can eliminate the ability to bank for medical leave purposes.
Right.
No, aren't we able to bank?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you don't
I'm
use
just-
it, everything rolls over
Okay.
into sick leave. Yep. Yep.
Stephanie will often have us sort of go back to the drawing board. We rarely dismantle entire provisions of our PNA, but when you have a provision or a section that you're talking about that's like open,
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, well, if we're here and we're doing the work, like, let's really talk about it, and is it working? And so, I mean, again, for anyone listening, you're not envisioning dismantling or totally redoing, but it's like, if you're here and you're looking at it,
Right.
go down to the
You might as well
studs.
look at it, yeah.
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 I do think more education about it
I
would
do
be nice,
too.
though, because the
Yeah.
first year teachers have so much being, not thrown at, that sounds bad, but so much being given to them within the first 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Without even having kids in the building, that it's ridiculously overwhelming. I mean, even transferring to a new district, the first 3 or 4 weeks is overwhelming. So having more education around what the policy is and what it looks like.
Yeah.
And then what it would mean if you banked, and
Are
then like.
Those
just
types of
everything.
topics, because again, I'm thinking of Casey's point of you get so much those first few weeks as an educator.
Oh my God.
Are those topics ever discussed at the mentoring meetings?
If you have the information.
I know, right?
I can't believe that I haven't talked yet. I was able to, so.
I want you to come to a microphone though.
Yes, you do need it.
Yeah.
It's wireless. Take your time. Oh, she's coming to you.
Oh, yeah.
It's on.
It's on. Okay. First of all, we try to do as much as we can during our orientations, like Dr. Higgins said, when we go over contracts and talk about how many days they have and how those accrue as a bank. So we try to explain that to them. Again, as you shared, there's a lot coming at them at once. We don't really touch on it much during NTA because NTA, as you said, there's so much they need to know. We really focus
Right.
more there on just curriculum and,
Yep.
and Skyward and Canvas and all those kinds of things. But do we tie this into mentor meetings? I wouldn't say we actually present or discuss it at mentor meetings, but listening to this conversation, it's something we can tie into. It might be something, that they probably ask their mentors about, because that's one of the, mentors helping you in a lot of different facets with everything about the district. But it would definitely probably be beneficial for us to tie it in some way to mentoring. Maybe some frequently asked questions, maybe some little highlights, those kind of things that helps them, kind of guides them along. But as far as it actually, have we had it as a topic, I can't say that it's actually been a structured topic.
Because I do think our leave is very complicated when you're looking it up by hours, and then people have to divide that out.
That's how it is in the,
Yes,
Yeah.
and so and then there's 3 different sections, and people don't understand why there's 3 different sections, and there's 2 different places to look it up, and they're different, and
Yes.
they get taken out at different times, so I just don't think that is very clear. Like, people definitely need communication about those leave days.
For sure.
And how to look them up and understand.
Especially our new.
So we do have a section, we did that little 1 or 2 pager at the beginning of the P&A, and we do not emphasize in there that about like rolling over days and like you need to consider this.
Right.
So we're not even there yet, but I would add as a solution under the title of education, sort of adding info to that P&A summary that is maybe emphasizing the benefit to banking days, or the why you would use
Right.
those.
Are we on solutions?
Yeah, we're not. I skipped
Okay.
because
Yeah.
I didn't want
It's
to.
okay. I got it too. We're good.
And I think
I
that's
jumped down
another
there. We can
opportunity
jump back.
for us. We continue through HR to add information into our weekly communication to principals that kind of then carry this over into your staff communication. I think that's a great way to tie in some of these highlights we want to make sure that we
I
keep
like that too.
featuring for the P&A, and this would be another one that would be a great example for us to include a couple times a year, probably even.
Yeah.
Because people have to be at the right place to be able to take it in and for it to make sense for them, so.
I mean, even experienced teachers, to be honest, I get questions about leave all the time as a building rep.
Do we have any cap at all on rolling over days?
No.
Not that I know of.
So you work here for 20 years, you never use a day, you'll have 200 days that you could get at $75 a day when you leave.
Yeah.
Is it then?
Isn't that, I mean,
I
that's,
think there was a different dollar amount for like before.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a little
I
bit
didn't-
of
the
from-
pre-2008,
yeah.
yes, which we grappled with extensively. But if you started in 2009 and you worked for 20 years, you could roll over 200. Okay, so we're not, so right now, just as a data point,
Isn't there there's a 50-day?
is
Like
there,
you can't sell. You have to have leave
There's like
50 if you
some-
have
there's
50
3
left
different
over there.
buckets.
there's 3 buckets. Let's talk about the buckets.
Yeah.
Because again,
There's
we
like
want to
the
know what
first-
we're talking about.
Like
We
on
might
the,
need
are we
help,
talking
Dr.
about on the employee
There's
online
that
leave
very
balances
first
thing?
bucket, where I don't think you can sell anything back, the very first bucket, right? Or
The
can
the
you?
temp leave?
The very
Is that what you're
first,
talking
like
about?
the one for the people pre-2000.
Pre-2008.
You
Yeah.
can't sell any of those days.
No.
back. You just have to
Yes.
use
You
them.
have to use them.
And again, I'm all about looking in, diving in, my memory of the last time we did this, and we were all like, gosh, is there a way we can do that? Is there was a dollar figure attached to that we did not jump the hurdle on last time. So we've got pre-2008 days. Like, I have that in mine when it shows up, but it has 0 in it and
Right.
never will have any, so.
Right.
Right. Sometime in 2057, we can delete that on our system.
Right.
Okay,
We
so
get rid of all those employees.
pre-2008.
Or they age out.
temp
age out.
leave.
We're
So
not
you
getting rid of them.
You
They're
can't
aging
sell
out.
those back, but if you would have an extended illness, you could use those.
Yes.
Okay, so they can be used.
Yes.
Okay. And then we have post-2008. And what are those buckets?
I think it's just one bucket. Is
That's
that?
it.
One?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's your bank.
Okay.
No, you have that in there.
And then you have
Right.
temp
Oh,
leave.
you probably have current temp leave and then,
Accumulated.
Post 2008,
big.
pre 2008.
okay.
So like on our leave balances thing, because I have mine pulled up, it has temp leave,
Yep.
accrued temp leave after 2008,
Yep.
and then it has sick bank. Those are the three. Those are just the.
So
three
your
things.
sick bank is your rolled over days
I don't
post
have anything in
2008?
there, but I need to talk to somebody because I don't think these numbers. Glad I looked it up.
So here's probably a better picture. So you're going to have temporary leave. That's your current leave. Okay. You have accrued temp leave after 2008. That's where your current days roll into. You have accrued temp leave prior to 2008 for anyone who
Who's
may
been-
have that.
yep.
And then I think everybody probably has sick bank and it's 0.
Right.
I can't remember exactly why sick bank is in there. I have a
That's at some
feeling
point
it
we
may have been something that happened during COVID, and we had to add a new bucket in there. And so I think that's why that's there. But I'm looking at mine as well, and it says 0. I think everybody's is probably 0.
So that accrued temp leave after July 1st, 2008. That's our sick leave that we have that we've currently.
Correct. That's where, so any unused leave from the temporary,
That's
from
where it
the, from
rolls.
the current year rolls into that one.
Got it.
Okay. And that accrued temp leave can be used or can be
That's just
saved
sick
or.
leave.
Okay.
That's the what's rolled over. It's like if I don't use 5 days this year, it rolls into that.
Correct.
That place.
Or
And
if
that
we
can
don't
be
sell it back.
used.
But that can only be used for sick.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. Because
In
I only
future
get the
years.
option of the illness or personal days for my whatever I have that current year.
Correct.
A professional
So it's not like I can
employee-
just take 200 personal days that last year.
Correct.
If I just bank everything, I would still get those 10 sick personal, and then I
Okay.
would have to be sick.
So prior to the June 30th, 2008, a professional employee with more than 50 days shall be eligible to apply for pay for unused days above 50. Pay for unused days above 50 shall be calculated to $25 a day.
So we previously did have a 50-day cap.
Yes, before the 2008.
Yep.
I do
Okay.
not see anything in, from the after 2008.
So you can buy back those pre-2008 days?
I thought we said we could.
You have, so if you have 50, the way I'm reading it,
If
if
you
you
have
have
more than
$50 in your bank,
50.
that's
That
50
one's-
that you cannot sell back.
Yes.
Right.
I would imagine that the number of employees that impacts is probably relatively few.
Right. But yeah.
So one thing we need to consider is that if we would add a number that you must have before you can buy back your days, that's going to add complexity to the system.
Yeah.
It may be worth it for the outcome. That's something we'd have to talk about.
Right.
But it is going to add just one more piece.
Absolutely.
So like, just thinking, you're like, if we decide to change it to 13, just throwing out a number there. You have to bank at least 3. You can't sell everything and get yourself to 0. Is that what you're kind of thinking right now?
I mean, I'm not thinking of a specific number, but obviously now we would have another line that would show up in the software
If we're banking.
if we're banking day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'd have one more bucket.
It may not be. It may just, and we would want to talk with payroll in the business office, but it may just be like if my accrued temp after 2008 doesn't say 30 or say 50 or whatever that number is, then I don't get the email about selling back my days.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, I see.
So.
Well, and I
Hang
wonder
on, let me-
how, because KCK has a bank that's run by the district and NEA. So I'm wondering where that goes and then how to go about, because obviously people would be like, hey, I need to talk to you guys. Here's this is what I need. And then that would be a discussion. Because I know other districts do that too. That wouldn't, I don't know.
Turner has that as well.
Yeah.
I believe when you, at the beginning of your contract, you donate 1 or 2 days or
Yeah.
whatever, then you opt into the bank.
Yeah.
And then you're part of the bank, and then if you should need it or whatever, you apply
Yeah.
to use so many days.
Which would add complexity to things, which is what I was thinking of when
Well,
when you're talking about complexity.
And
Again,
then
I
believe
would
you
not
have
want to
to-
sit on that committee, so that's another
Well,
ask
right.
to you. Like, is that, I completely understand that as a benefit. And there is the huge benefit of someone who is in a terrible personal situation where they need the days. There's also room for abuse, just like any benefit, right? So,
But the committee could say, no, you can't have those days.
they
Well,
could-
you have to pay them back.
Right.
In Turner, you have to pay the days back.
So if you use
so
days,
if
you
I
have to give
took
them back
8
to the bank.
days, I might say,
Interesting.
next year I'm gonna give you 4 days back, and the following year I'll give you the other 4. So there's a lot of management. It's
Right.
a small school district, that's why I
Right.
think it's probably a little easier. Do you have to give the days back?
Sorry.
You borrow them and then you give them back.
Sorry if I'm speaking out again.
No, go
and
ahead.
I maybe shouldn't, but Shawnee Mission does have a Board of Education sick bank that is available
Yeah.
to employees. So it is available for when people completely exhaust all of their days, have no access to short-term disability, and are undergoing an extenuating circumstance. There is that provision that they can ask for, and it doesn't require any type of,
Okay.
they're just days, and they don't have to pay them back in future years. So
And is that something that we opted into at some point?
it's in the P&A.
Oh, okay.
let's read that.
I was gonna say, I
Um,
don't remember that. There's a lot of stuff at the beginning.
do you have any memory? Okay, so Article X, Paragraph C, Board of Education's Sick Leave Assistance Bank. Let me get there. The use of the sick leave assistance bank is for the professional employees only. In an instance of prolonged illness or personal injury other than that already covered by, what is Article 8, Section E? That's probably the medical leave. Article 8, Section E. 6. Temporary leave. Oh, it probably means you're out of temporary leave. Let me see.
Section 6 isn't it worker,
Oh, work comp.
is it work comp?
Okay, so not covered by work comp. Now I lost this section. Okay, so in the instance of prolonged illness or personal injury that is not work comp, a professional employer or anyone acting on their behalf may make an application to the board to borrow up to 20 days. And you do not have to pay it back. Where did those days come from, Dr. Higgins?
They come from a bank of days that the Board of Education has set aside.
Okay. And there's up to 250 per school year for all.
There's the bank, yeah, 250.
Okay. And you can use it when they've exhausted all your temporary leave and you have no access to another benefit, like short-term disability or work comp.
Correct.
Okay. So again, just as data and information, that's where we are in Shawnee Mission on our sick leave bank. And how many of those do we even get? per year?
A handful. COVID, obviously, there was a
Right,
lot
that was a
more,
lot, yeah.
because we did some different provisions HR-wise and as a district, but it's not a ton of requests that we get, because of the extenuating nature that is required, you know. But there are situations that arise that people speak with us, and we make the request on their behalf,
Okay.
so.
Okay.
So could they
I would
have,
also
they,
add that there are times that we bring it to the attention of the employee when we're working with an employee that's in a challenging situation, and we make them aware of it and kind of support them in requesting those days.
Okay.
Got it. So for anyone listening, Pam just shared that human resources will, when working with an employee facing a really challenging situation, bring it to their attention. So it's not something you have to like know about if you're working with HR because you have a long-term illness. It's something that they'll present as an option as they're going through your options with you.
so this year, if there was like a first-year teacher that had exhausted all their days due to COVID, they would be able to apply for this?
COVID would not. If they had exhausted all their days and then they had a life-threatening
Surgery or
diagnosis of something, that
That
would
would do it.
probably be an extenuating circumstance situation that would allow for that.
See, I think we're-
But my kid having constant ear infections,
Right.
myself having the flu A, unfortunately, those are, I mean, that's our daily sickness stuff that we deal with.
But a staff bank could potentially cover those
That's
if we
right.
if we started that.
Or if you didn't have enough for your maternity leave?
Right. I would be hesitant about that, but yeah.
It's hard. I mean, that could
That's
then.
hard. It's absolutely hard.
Again, like, I personally see a benefit. I would never volunteer to sit on that committee. You'd get ones that were so easy, then you'd
Yes.
get ones that you'd be like, really? But then
Well,
there's.
and that's why you would have,
Mhm.
you know.
I would say we see a lot more situations in HR where people don't have a bank of
Right.
their own. They don't have their own accrued leave and are facing some situation that whether it be starting family, surgery, whatever, and they're shocked by that, rather than the other situation of an extenuating circumstance and they need assistance.
Right.
We see a large, way more in
Yeah.
that first area of their own accrued leave.
Yeah.
Okay. I think maybe it makes sense to do a quick run through of our interests, remind ourselves of them, and then start a list of solutions, knowing that there's some data points that we need that we would want to have. One being, and you guys, I just did some quick and dirty math, and I would need to talk, I frankly need to talk more to the finance department
Yeah.
about this, but if we say, okay, a leave day is $100 a day, because we got the 75 and you're not getting that, and we multiply that by, how many, 3,500 teachers or something, I mean, we could be talking $500,000
Right.
here, so it's something that we're gonna have to potentially, and I need to talk to Russ, I need to talk to other district leadership and understand this. It may be something that if we're looking at a solution that's adding a day, we have to talk about it as we're talking about compensation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so that's, again, it could be, I mean, sometimes we're talking about things that in the scheme of the budget are nominal. I don't think that this would be, so, it may be something we need to say for that. Yeah, and again, because it's, a benefit, our principals get 1 day per contract month as well. It could be something where the board is then like, well, we try and in general treat our employee groups equal, so we
Right.
could be looking at other things that would have to be considered. So just want to throw those caveats out there. I have done none of that, again, trying to keep with the process while also being efficient, but I haven't had any of those discussions. So the interests that we talked about are trying to have, minimal discretion required by supervisors and to have a really unbiased, straightforward approval process. Minimal involvement of management time and retaining flexibility and use of leave days. Having a simple system that people can understand. Not having it's probably impossible to have 0 teachers that ever run out of days, but we have an interest in minimizing situations where we have professional employees run out of days and have to use their dock days. And I would say particularly when we feel like they've reasonably managed it. So I think we would exclude those who just aren't smart about it. That's
Right.
probably a very small percentage, but we want to have healthy, happy employees in our system. We want everyone to have a reasonable ability to take care of themselves, to take care of their family and their household members, and to have good work-life balance. No incentives or methods really to game the system. We want the system to be the system and have integrity. So whatever your personal philosophy is on leave days shouldn't impact how the benefit that you receive from the district. It needs to be affordable and sustainable over time. We do want to think about, how many days per year is reasonable to be out of the classroom, given the impacts that could have on students and learning in your building and your coworkers. We do see it, we talked about seeing it as really like an employment benefit. So a little bit, we don't see it as much as monetary, even though there is a monetary component to the other side. To the individual employee, they're not seeing it as compensation, they're seeing it as an employment benefit and a matter of flexibility in their life. In terms of competitiveness, what we specifically talked about is we want people to stay in our system and not leave it for others. And we've seen some ways that we are competitive in Shawnee Mission because of the flexibility, and that's viewed as more attractive than systems where there's this differentiation between sick and personal. We want simplicity in our system. And we want people to think about the future and understand that if you take long-term medical leave, that's going to be unpaid unless you've banked that benefit. Did I miss
Nope.
anything? Okay. So some solutions that we have had is we did throw out there, we could just add some leave days. We could add a number of leave days per school year that you get. We could, and again, Stephanie always talks about these as, putting some together. We could change our leave bank system. It could be something that's managed cooperatively. We could add in a requirement that you must have so many days banked before you can buy them back at the $75 a day amount, which I think is a system we had pre-2008. We could do more education about leave, particularly new teachers. And we talked about adding info to the P&A summary and also education by HR, both to professional employees and to leadership. What else?
I was thinking that we could do an hourly sub leave so that people didn't have to take a half day to go to the doctor. So be able to put in a sub for a set amount of hours instead of having to take a half day, I think would be helpful.
Interesting idea. So you could put in, I'm only going to be gone, I'll be back by my third period or whatever, because I just have the night after appointment. That's not a half day. Any idea if that's doable
Half day, full day.
for subs? We have to pay subs a half day. You can't retain a sub for a number of hours.
Correct. Half day, full day.
So, if we did that, and again, I'm just trying to, sometimes our most creative solutions, like potentially allow it to be taken by an hour knowing that we would lose the sub. We would pay that amount of money, right? You take 1 hour, we still have to pay a sub half a day. Right?
But then the building sub could also be utilized for those situations instead.
Okay?
Could we have a system to use the building sub and not have to take a sub?
Okay.
But how do we code that? I'm only asking that because
Yeah.
there are some employees that don't use our health center here because they're taking their spouse's insurance, which sometimes is better than ours. And so I don't want to penalize them for having a better health system that they're using. And we are able, which I know is a benefit, to be able to come over to the health center and not have to take a sub. but also it seems like you're penalizing them for getting better health insurance by not allowing them to be able to come. Either that or be able to use the health center. I don't know, it's hard.
So you're mentioning, and I've completely forgotten, I never remember to use this benefit, but if we go to the Shawnee Mission Health Clinic, you do not have to use leave.
No.
The building will cover it.
Mhm.
Like,
The building covers it.
Yeah.
But if you are not on
If
Shawnee Mission Health Insurance,
and you have to go elsewhere.
and
that
you
have to
choose
use.
to be on a spouse's plan or partner's plan or whatever, then you do not get that benefit.
That's
Right.
right. So you would have
You
to
have
take
to
a
use
half day.
either a half or a full day.
So when you're running over to the clinic to get antibiotics or whatever, you might only put in 2 hours and then come back.
You don't put
You don't have
any.
to put,
You don't
you just
put
go.
anything
Any time in at all.
You just let them know, hey, this
Okay.
is what I'm doing.
The caveat to that would be unless the building administrator says, hey, I'd
Right.
rather you just
can't,
go
yeah.
and come back and you're only gonna miss an hour rather than having to lose a teacher for a half day.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you know any school districts that allow you to take leave by the hour? I mean, like, I'm just wondering, because it's like if someone else is doing it, it's feasible.
Off the top of my head, no.
I have not heard of that, but
Okay, I'm gonna add that. I'm gonna add that to our homework list. Like, just do some quick looking into like,
Okay.
is anyone doing that? Because we would want to hear. Somewhere I have a homework list. Here we go. Anyone doing hourly leave? I mean, I would. I mean, as a parent, I can tell you there are so many little tasks that are, you know, eye checkups and all those sorts of things that aren't half-day things. Maybe
Right.
are just an hour early or something
Right.
like that. Okay, so is anyone doing hourly leave, and is that possible from a system perspective, knowing that it's not possible from a sub perspective? In other words, we're going to pay for a half day no matter what. Okay.
Do principals, I know at my building, it's typically I will cover an hour before, after school, during the day, if somebody has an appointment. Is that typical
Oh, that's it.
in other buildings?
So we have or at least Christy's thing is a culture thing in her building. If she has one of her team members approach her and say, hey, I just have to get my kid to this appointment. I'm going to be 30 minutes after my contract time. You're like, hey, I can handle that tomorrow morning. You don't need to put in a half day.
Yeah.
We do the same thing.
Yeah, same at my building.
Okay. So something to consider with that is we know of buildings at least that have beginning of the day, end of the day flexibility. Okay.
or if someone goes during plan time, hey, I'm gonna be 15 minutes late to get back.
Okay. Other solutions. That's what I think Stephanie would say right there, so I'm just channeling. I asked about bereavement leave just because I had this thought of leaning into our leave is leave and just saying no, you know, no more bereavement specific, leave is leave, and doing that as like in combination with adding leave days.
But the bereavement does not come out of our leave days.
Yeah, the
Right.
bereavement's its own thing.
Right, but like you could take up to 13, 16, right, depending on how many you had. So my solution was if we're adding days, if we're like, let's say we
limit
went to
how many people
13,
die?
taking away bereavement leave.
You're trying to put a limit on when people die?
No, I'm trying to put a limit on the total number of days per year and having leave be leave.
Right,
It's
but if
just
you're,
like-
but by doing that, you're still like, so I can't grieve.
No, you would just take your leave days for any
But
reason.
that's.
But then
out of our
when I run out of
control.
days, then I have to grieve, like.
But
no.
isn't that similar to one of the other districts? Like,
Olathe.
they had 13 days and it was illness or bereavement?
And that's fair.
So, I mean, again,
I
that's
still
my
think it puts a
question.
limit on.
Is it an
How long it's
employment,
gonna
is
take me
it
to
a
get over
benefit
things.
to say, I know that if I have this, you know, horrible event happen to me, particularly if it's like child, miscarriage,
Right.
spouse, that sort of thing, is it better for you to mentally say that's not coming out of my days, right?
Absolutely.
That's
Absolutely it
something
is.
that I get if
That's
that
one thing.
happens
That's
to
one
me.
less thing I have to worry about at that point.
Right.
So people see it better as because again, if we're thinking about the cost to this and
Right.
how that looks, obviously if
Well, we could ask for numbers on bereavement.
Yeah, let's
So
ask
how
for
many
numbers
people are
on
taking
bereavement.
bereavement
Now,
here?
it says illness and bereavement leave for Olathe,
Uh-huh.
but it also says in cases of terminal illness or the death of a member of the employee's immediate or household family, up to 5 days of leave in a contract year will be provided to the employee at no deduction from the employee's yearly or accumulated leave.
How does it count? Sorry, it's of your immediate family.
That's what it says in there.
I don't see the list.
So that's probably
So does that mean if you have an aunt and uncle pass away who do not live with you in the same year, you can only take bereavement for one of them, and then the other 3 days you get charged?
I
That would be
don't
a
think
good
that
question
if it's a
for
bereavement,
Olathe.
I don't believe it's being
I
you're
just-
not getting
Yeah.
charged any days.
It said if it's bereavement of immediate household is the 5
Household
days.
family. A death of a member of an employee's immediate or household family.
so it's probably. I'm guessing, and we can ask them. I'm
And
guessing it's considered household.
immediate family members shall include the employee's parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, grandchildren, as well as parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, grandchildren, children of the employee's spouse.
So it's the up and down line,
Yeah.
not the sideways line like we have as well.
Um,
No aunts or uncles or nieces or nephews. What about siblings?
mhm.
Okay. Again, I'm just thinking toward modernization, and it is not common to have separate bereavement, but if that's
Right.
working for us and we think that it is better for someone who's going through that event to not think of it impacting their leave days, then maybe we don't touch it. But again, if we're talking about adding days and the financial component to it, that perhaps is something that could balance it out, but that depends entirely on usage. So, okay.
You got it? You can sit
Oh,
over here.
I
don't
with-
have-
You can sit with us.
I don't have a ton of data.
That's okay.
But I do have this February and last February.
Oh, okay.
So last February, there was a total of 33 bereavement days used. So just looking at probably a half a month, 33 bereavement, and that's immediate and other. This year, we're at 80 bereavement days. Now, keep in mind, that's 2,200 certified employees that have used 80 bereavement days.
So far this month.
This month, correct.
And what is the employment group? It's
Certified employees.
certified, so that includes administrators.
Correct. That
Okay.
includes administrators. So I think you could probably think personally how many times you've used bereavement on your own, and speaking to Rachel's solution, how long have you been in the district? How many
Yeah.
bereavement have you used? If those extra days were just in your temporary leave, does that benefit you over the course of time?
Yeah.
If you've had a lot of tragedy in your life, then maybe not so much. So,
Well, and again, as I'm just thinking about how I see more modern systems going, and we have, one of the reasons I raised this, and I forgot to mention this earlier, is I believe, and I could be remembering correctly, that I have heard of situations where someone says, look, I'm not close to my aunts at all, I barely know them. However, I have this person that I'm super close to,
Right.
whose death impacted me greatly. And now I'm like having to talk about it at work and explain that I need these days, but I don't get them because they're not in the bereavement
Right.
days, right? So you have a thing where people have different familial relationships. They have
Absolutely.
friends that are like family to them. And so because of the way we do it, and because we do have to put some reasonable limitation on it, in a way, you're really including some people and you're excluding others based on what the relationships look like in their life. So if it's working for us well enough that we don't want to change it, we don't. But it was just a thought that I had.
Absolutely.
Because I do think we've had situations where administration has been put in this awkward position of, I believe you're hurting, I trust you're hurting, it doesn't fall within the P&A. And obviously we couldn't have a provision that said for any
Right.
death, if your neighbor 2 doors down dies, right? But maybe that person was really close to you.
Right.
So maybe just something to mull over. And as I get feedback, and as people listen to this, get feedback from your members too,
Right.
because I do think getting annual data and a dollar figure, right? Because if we're down to compensation and we're talking about triggers, it may be something that some group comes up with, you know, as a solution, whereas if we did this, then that would save money.
So I'm gonna throw out a new solution,
Okay,
and I'm gonna throw out numbers of days
Okay.
on our solution as well.
okay,
10 days are days. So keep our 10 days are days, not touching that.
okay,
Adding to the days are days, 5/6/bereavement.
and in your solution, what happens to those days if you don't use 10 or 5? Do those all roll? Do those,
I mean, as an association, I would say they all roll.
yeah, okay.
Would be what I'd advocate for.
I just really struggle putting a number on bereavement
I
days.
I know, and I'm struggling with that too.
Like, I understand, I get it. I just really, cause like, I've been really fortunate. I think I've used 4. Like,
Right.
I've been very fortunate, but I've got some older family members, and oh my God.
And where
Well-
they essentially came from this. So my original thought process with this solution was I was going to bring up before we started talking about bereavement, keeping our 10 days or days, and adding X amount of days can be used as sick.
Okay,
And so maybe then another solution, taking the bereavement out of that, taking the number of days out of that too. I don't know why I threw in. I like the number 5 because I'm a kindergarten teacher and we talk about the number 5 a lot. So then another solution on kind of feeding off of that, 10 days or days still, and then adding X amount of days that can only be used as sick.
yeah,
And then that also helps a little bit at least with those early career teachers who are running out of days.
I don't think we should touch the bereavement. I think
I
if
agree.
we
Yeah.
can add 3 sick days, I think it doesn't sound like people are overusing the bereavement. I also think that we had a staff member pass away in this district, and that is maybe why we have 80
Yeah.
versus what we had last year, and that was at a high school, so I'm sure that that accounted for a lot of it. I also think that we need to clarify the loss of a pregnancy, because I think that's the problem. People are taking sick days for a loss of a pregnancy, and that's why we wanted to add it to bereavement, because I feel like it better fits in bereavement than having to use your sick days. I don't think that's should be considered a sick day, and people are taking sick days for that.
Agreed.
so let me ask you this. This is, again, just my other philosophical thought about bereavement days. If I had a child pass away, 3 days would not even begin to cover it,
Nope, I took 6
right?
both times.
And so then what happens when you're, again, it's just sort of that artificial number of days, which maybe we're saying, hey, 3 covers enough
I was
so
gonna
that I'm thinking I don't have to take that from my 10 allotted days, right? So maybe that's what we're doing. But again, that's where my thinking also comes from, is that, you know, the list there is your father and your mother. For me personally, mine are still very young. Obviously, if it was a child, like, bereavement doesn't even begin to cover, you know, what I
Oh,
would
for my
need to
parents,
be.
no, it's gonna take
Set
way
number
longer
of
than 3
days that'll-
days. But
So
I
that's
understand the
just-
cap I understand the cap of 3, and I think people get that, and I think they're comfortable with that. Because, like, obviously, grief is weird, and it comes in waves, and some days are better than others, and heaven forbid spouses are lost or people that are close with their parents. Like, I'm gonna be a hot mess when my parents go. I talk to them all the time, but I think the 3 days is okay. I think that takes that much off that plate. And personally, when I went through my pregnancy loss, having those 3 days would have been nice, because I had to take the 6 out of my own days. And then my one admin didn't know, so that was fun. So I walked back into, where you been? I was like, oh, hey, let's talk. So,
So it sounds like, while we may want to keep it in the wings,
yeah.
overall, we're not thinking a solution may involve touching the bereavement days in any way, which
Agreed.
I'm saying because, again, as we all get feedback, which I do when I visit schools on Thursdays, people just walk up to me and want to talk, and
course.
frankly, that's where some of the solutions that I've added to lists have come from.
Yeah.
So just something to think about is, you know, is that as we are talking it out, it looks like doing anything that would change that is maybe not something that we want to consider absent,
Right.
us really seeing a meaningful financial component to it, or something that may move the lever on number of days in a way that we think is important or valuable. Okay, I'm just going to run through them really quick because there's got to be more. So we're talking about adding to the 10, treating them exactly the same. I'm going to add that, treating exactly the same. Modifying the leave bank so that it is managed by the association and the district. Capping the number of banked days that you can buy back in the summer. Doing more to educate our professional employees about leave, particularly those who are new to the district. We've talked about the ability to take leave by the hour, and the feasibility of that. We've talked about leaving our 10 days, but adding 5 that can only be used for sick or bereavement. So in some ways that would increase. So if you've got a loss in the family, you get, you can take 5.
But then also just taking the bereavement out of that same, so 10 days are days, adding X sick days.
And then there's probably multiple things, but at least right now with this, we're talking about treating them the same. They can all roll over. And then another solution, again, 10 days are leave days, and then saying X days can only be used as sick, leaving the bereavement days as they are. And then we've also talked about, as a solution, clarifying the loss of a child, including pregnancy loss and bereavement. I think our next step is to talk through each of these solutions, but are there any others that we want to add to this list?
Unlimited PTO. No, I'm just joking.
No, I mean-
Obviously, that's not a thing. Sorry,
It
but
would be a solution.
it would be a solution,
would
but
be a
it's not
solution.
feasible.
I think
Not good for kids.
Listen, I get it.
I mean, technically, you can do that. You just won't
Don't
be
get paid.
employed. You won't,
That's
you
right,
won't
that's
get paid.
right.
You won't be employed by us
You
anymore.
always have that option. Turns out choices and consequences.
I mean, you could have unlimited leave and say every day you're gone is a doc day, right?
true.
Yeah.
Take as many as you want. We're
Yep.
doing this to salary.
That's right.
And any day that you're not here is a doc day.
Yep.
HR might contact you about job abandonment at some
Right.
point.
Right.
Fine.
Again, though, I think that's why I ask those philosophical questions, because it's like, I do think you want to say, hey, like, a normal human cannot work, 5 days a week, X weeks on end, taking into account all the things that happen on our lives, and still be good at their job. Like, that's not how humans function. And we want to make leave easy to take if you need to take it.
Right.
Um,
Agreed.
So,
No, I think all those solutions were what we've discussed.
okay. So I think what Stephanie would have us do next is go through each of these and talk about benefits, detriments, and additional data we would need before we could decide on them. So the first one I had is just add some days. Add some days, treat them exactly the same. So of course, the first thing that comes to mind is we need a cost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we need a cost to that. And I think as a subset of that, I'm going to have to think about how to do this, because I mean, if we're adding days, there's going to be other pay groups that come into consideration on that.
Yes.
So, and again, that's just conversations I'm going to have to figure out, overall cost. I think a benefit is that it's going to look more even to what districts, Olathe,
KCK.
look more even to Olathe, KCK. Who else has more than us?
At Let, yeah.
Except for a couple.
Um,
Gardner.
We don't know Gardner. Did we find out Gardner?
Yeah, I thought you said it was
Gardner
10.
has
You
10
had
illness/personal. Turner has 10 illness/personal. Piper has 15. Lawrence has 12.
So Blue Valley,
Blue Valley has 13. It says illness/personal, but I don't remember if we
okay.
like dug into their whether it was. Do they have to ask for personal days? Okay, I was like I couldn't remember that. Olathe does the step system.
So,
So what districts have more than us but no stipulations on them? Like just flat out more than us?
Piper.
But at least we don't have that DeSoto, you have to request a personal day.
8 discretionary, 4 personal.
Yeah.
So those 4 personal probably have to be scheduled out, is what I'm guessing. I'm guessing 8 for any reason without notice, and probably those personal required. That's my guess. If they've separated them as discretionary and personal. I would add as a homework assignment that I think we need to go to Human Resources in Olathe, Blue Valley, KCK, DeSoto, and ask them how in the real world they are managing illness versus personal, right? Like, because it could be that, you know, you have to do some homework and bring in and show that you took your kid to the doctor or whatever. It could be that they're not really differentiating, right? Like, I think we need to know what they're doing day to day in practice
In
and what their feedback is. If they're like,
KCK, what it used to be was you had to put your personal day in 2 weeks before you needed to take it, and then your admin was the one that needed to then approve it.
okay,
There were years where it was approved and it didn't matter, but there was also years where none of them were approved.
I would think we would want to probably keep things the same with our days.
DeSoto does require prior approval. They require prior approval.
for personal days.
So it says all requests for leave not of an emergency nature must be submitted via Skyward to the building administrator. Leave of 1 day or less must be submitted 24 hours prior to the requested leave date. Leave of more than 1 day must be submitted 5 days prior to use and must be administrator approved. So they use emergency nature, which I would take as being sick.
So, but then do all those days roll over? So they technically are building up more days. Yes, they have to get approval, but they're building up more days that they could use then for sick, right?
Yeah. Because if they're not approved, they're banking them.
Right. And then rolling.
I
over.
don't know that 100%. I'm looking.
I'm going to add a solution just because I want us to think about it. We could start teachers with a certain number of days,
Yeah.
right? We could say, you're going to start with this many days, you get a bank for sick that starts at this number.
Yeah.
Now, how we make that equitable across everyone, I'm not exactly sure. We would maybe just be adding to everyone's bank, but, and there'd be a cost to that too. But if we get back the number of banked leaves and we're talking about a problem in employment years 1 through 5, I don't know. Starting number in bank. I'm just gonna add that. Starting number in bank / add to everyone's bank for equity. Okay, so I think as we're fleshing out this first solution of add days, do you remember when we went to 10 days, our days, was there a reduction in the number of leave days per year in Shawnee Mission?
I wasn't here.
Don't believe so.
I believe we've always had 10.
We've
Yeah,
always
we've
had
always
10.
had 10.
Two personal.
Oh, goodness.
See, that, someone mentioned that to me, and I don't know who,
Do we
what,
know
when, where,
what
why,
year?
but they said, hey, when we went to leave is leave.
Okay, hold on.
I don't remember. I started in 2007, and I don't remember.
Gosh, I don't remember either.
I started in 2003. I think it was always 10, but I can't 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was prior to that. It was 10.
I thought it was 10
Yeah,
as
I was-
well.
Yeah.
And maybe of those 10, 2 could be personal. I don't remember the specifics of what it was.
I think we had to have approval for personal.
We did have to have approval for personal.
And we think that was with 10 days?
I want to say 3 were personal and we had to have approval. Does that sound right, Wendy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it was 3 personal, 7 sick, but with approval.
Okay.
It's a long time ago.
So I do think, I know, we're sort of getting at that there's a general idea that the more flexibility you have, there's going to be some small decrease in the total number of days, or at least that's what it seems like when we look at comparable districts, because they're preserving more days for sick uses versus personal uses. And so, and we've identified that as an interest, is that yes, you need a certain number of personal days for personal business, but also what we're really talking about is you and your family's health
Right.
for most of it. And so we may need to be talking about, if we're adding days, some mechanism that is simple and doesn't require administrative oversight, but that preserves for sick without having people gain the system. So some mechanism that preserves bulk of days for sick. Like, how do we do that without, adding complexity and administrative work? And again, maybe we throw that away and say there's no way to do that, but that may then lead to our decision about what is a reasonable number of days to add, right? Like, we don't have a way to preserve them all for sick because we value flexibility more, and so this is where we're landing on number of days to, you know what I'm explaining that correctly? Like, I can't think of a way to do that, but maybe as we go through these other solutions. Okay, the leave bank issue. How would that change from what we currently do? Will we have a committee? Is that what would happen? And so if we changed our sick leave bank, there would be a committee comprised of who?
NEA-Shawnee mission, maybe the board or the district.
Yeah.
Just think we need a little bit more flexibility, especially for if we're not gonna offer days, and people, I think we should be able to, if we would like to donate days to people that are maybe newer employees that don't have 10 days and they get COVID or they get some other sickness, because when you first are starting out, it is, especially if you work in the elementary world, you're getting sick a lot.
Just a point of clarification, Rachel, can you maybe use the language district-wide sick bank
Yeah.
pool? Because there is a
We
lot
have
of,
that, yeah.
like, people will say, well, I have this many days banked up. Well, when I
Right.
say I have this many days banked up, that's completely different than this
Just a
bank.
bank,
Yeah,
The
that
sick
is
leave
being
pool.
discussed.
Yeah.
Yeah, district-wide sick leave pool or
And just-
something.
City-based bank.
Again, I'm trying to understand how that works. We just have a certain number per year that is just put in that bank.
For the
Currently?
one we have right
Yeah.
now?
Yes.
No one has to,
So the board has allocated, I believe,
I think it's
250 days that they will consider when extenuating circumstances come up to.
Up to 20 days.
Give those out to employees.
okay. So I think right now, if I'm remembering correctly, there usually will be like a recommendation by HR in executive session because it's a private matter.
That's correct.
And then the board approves it as an action item.
That's correct. The employee comes to us, we make the request on behalf of the employee.
Okay. And so the change that we're talking about is not the number of days in the bank. It is not that any employee, right now it's capped at 20 days from the bank per year. It's just that the decision would be a joint decision about whether to grant or deny an application.
I think we're
And
talking
people-
about, like, personal employees putting in days. So the bank would not be the 250. It would
Oh.
be what we are donating within that
Okay.
bank. And then that bank, that
Okay.
particular one being controlled by
Oh.
both entities. So if I run out of days and I need,
Okay.
let's say I get the flu or something or whatever, or I don't know, my kid breaks their leg, I don't know. Then I could go to that committee or to that group and be like, hey, I'm out of days because of, like, not because I went on a cruise or something, I don't know, because I was sick or my kiddos were sick and now I have this extra issue that's occurring. They could just give me those 3 days as opposed to going to HR and then having them go to the board to ask for from that bank. So it's just
So
a
I'm gonna,
smaller-
let me ask you, and maybe
Yeah.
we need to consider all solutions, because I'm seeing, we have a board bank, we have an association bank, we have a joint bank. Like, how many banks are we gonna have? How many pools?
We don't-
Sorry.
We just would have
Association
two.
bank, what are you talking about?
Like, so we would,
As of right now, we just have the board bank and
Yes.
then whatever we have each individually saved
right.
up.
So if, so.
Those are the only two things we have at this point.
So under the solution, where we have something closer to, what was it, KCK?
It's
then?
KCK and
Or
Olathe, right?
Olathe.
Yeah.
Okay, so this would revise our current sick leave pool in what respects?
You would opt in, essentially. So like when you're hired, or I guess, I'm assuming they have some sort of caveat in their contracts if you need to opt in at some, I don't know how that
So you
works.
would-
I would have to,
It
Let's
sounds
fix
like it would not be board funded anymore.
No,
It would be
That's-
employee,
I'm
It would
sorry.
be
it would
the-
be employee
Correct.
funded.
Yes.
Employee
There you go.
funded.
And it could be
And potentially limitless, because it's just how many days are in there that.
Yes.
then-
how many employees want to
Okay.
donate their days
Okay.
to that.
and then it would be that committee making that decision
Got
as
it.
opposed
Now,
to.
is there anything on there though that you can use the bank if you donated a day into it?
Well, that's how it works in other districts, is
Yes.
you're only allowed to ask to pull from the pool if you are contributing to the pool.
Yes.
Like,
And then you have to, we would talk about whether you.
whether
pay
they
those
have to
days
pay it back or not,
Yeah,
yeah.
and Olathe, I don't think you have to pay it back. I can check. When I was there, I did not feel like we had to pay it back. Like, we all opted in every year. You could decide one to how many ever days you wanted to donate. Everybody for sure donated one. And then I do not feel like you had to pay it back.
We can talk to Dom for KCK
I can talk to someone in Olathe.
Yeah. to figure that out too. And we could do whatever it is that we decide we want to do if we
Pay
go
back
down
or
that
not. The
road.
problem with not paying back is if you're already in a situation where your health is so extenuated,
Yep.
then you put the pressure on the other side to pay it back. Or sometimes those people may not, right? They may
I was gonna say, what happens if they
resign.
leave
Nothing
without paying it back?
happens.
So if
Yeah, I'm
you
not a
leave
big fan
without,
of the
I
paying
believe.
No,
It's
you're
been a long
okay.
time ago.
That's okay.
If you leave without paying it back, I believe you have to pay like you have to pay so many dollars a day or whatever it was.
Okay.
I think it was maternity leave. I was new to the district.
Right.
I think I ended up taking like, I don't know, 8 days or something.
Right.
And so I did 4, paid back 4 one day year and 4 the next year.
Okay.
So you're borrowing. It's a
That's
method
a
that
borrow.
allows you to borrow.
Yes.
I've
I'm
heard
gonna,
that.
I think.
I'm not against
I'm
that.
gonna ask.
Yeah.
So you could have a payback borrow method. Okay. All right. We're ending at 11, right?
Yes.
I want to flesh out just a couple more things before we leave. The solution of having so many days banked before you can buy back. Benefits, disadvantages.
Well, your new teachers having to bank those, that's gonna lessen their days that they start with already. So like if we're making them bank 2, then they only have their 8.
Right, or potentially you don't get that email. I think what we're talking
Or
about
if we're
is
just
you
talking
don't
about
get the
buying it
email in the
back.
summer.
Oh, okay.
That's what we're talking about.
Okay.
You don't get that email in the summer until you're beyond,
However
you know,
many.
however many
Okay.
days.
I'm okay with that.
I was gonna say, I don't have any
I'm okay with
pushback
it.
at all.
Yeah.
So I see the benefit as you push leave days towards sick.
Yes.
And then the disadvantages, we're adding complexity,
We are, yeah.
okay?
Having
Maybe.
to sort through.
Maybe.
To some extent.
Potentially compensation for people
Well,
that use it, I guess.
In reality, because right now, isn't there that pre-2008 where you have to? That almost makes it less complex.
I think there's systems already in place that would,
Yeah.
would
Oh, okay.
assist.
What would we do? So you're just like, you would just be like kind of frozen where you are, right?
Until you.
So we're not going to have this between 28 and 2024. We're just going to say wherever you are is where you are. So if you only have 5 days and we make you bank 20, you're not getting the email this summer.
Right.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
Maybe, but not too much complexity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Okay.
not seeing, to be honest, much drawback in it.
Yeah.
And then
Other than the immediate check in the summer that
Yeah.
you get for
Right,
whatever.
and
it
Those
there's
is.
people-
gonna be
those people that
some
utilize it,
people who, yeah, there's going to be
They're
a
not gonna get
drawback.
it. They won't get their, whatever it is they've got, up to $750.
Which I think we could all
argue.
argue that deferring that money to another time is well worth
Agreed.
every penny of it.
Did we talk about doing this when we increased from 50 to 75?
Yeah, we talked about it last year, because Dr. Gilhouse had brought it up, and we talked about potentially having people bank days to a certain point, and then we talked about like just the detriments that it could have as opposed to the pro. I mean, basically we just ended with, we'll increase it and see what happens. So that's that's where we ended.
Educating about leave, I definitely think no matter what, we're gonna need to update that P&A summary page to the
Agreed.
extent we
Oh,
make
yeah.
any changes. And
Agreed.
then, I mean, I can't imagine HR sees any detriment to putting a note in. Cause it's your contract, you should know about it, you should be educated about it.
Yeah, because some people still don't even understand you can go to the doctor and use a sick day. They're using personal days.
See, and I forget about that. I've been to the
Yeah.
clinic so many times. My personal experience is that it's been great. But I've forgotten completely that you could do that and just.
Yeah.
But I will say a lot of times when I go to the clinic, I'm homesick. So I'm
Right.
like taking a day because I'm
That's
taking
true.
a
Yeah,
day.
you're already
point.
sick, yeah.
And I'm like hoping no one sees me when I walk in my sweatpants. That's like the worst part about it being in this building. Like my coworkers are
Right.
here. Okay. Hourly sub leave. I do think we should put a pin in that and do a little bit of homework.
We can look it over.
Yeah.
You know, because I kind of like that idea. Again, none of us in this room are hourly employees, but
Right.
using leave in increments, I don't know. I will do some homework and HR can do some homework and see if someone's like, that's a starter or a non-starter.
Agreed.
And then the other ones are, I think, things that we need to consider as we learn about cost too,
Right.
which is like, you know, adding days that are only sick / bereavement days. If we're going to add, is limit them that they can only be used for sick and bereavement, or can only be used for sick and leave bereavement alone.
Right.
And then we had clarify what is the loss of a child. Again, if we're really talking through it, to some extent, that's going to add to use of bereavement leave.
Right.
Hopefully, we're not experiencing that so much that it's more than a nominal real number that we're talking about. But we do have a very large female employee pool here.
Yeah.
And I think we need to recognize that. So, and then I had added putting a starting number in the bank. So maybe we just add to everybody's bank now, and when you start, you get X number of days. And we'll understand the cost to that once we come up with some sort of average number per day or something like that. But there would be a cost component to that
So when they just start with an X number of days, like,
that can be used for sick, right? So your bank, when you come
so
in,
we
your
just
bank,
we give you your bank,
your bank has X days,
and then
that can be
would
used
we-
for illness.
Then would we keep the other ones, or would it just be that bank? Okay, and then
You'd just still roll over.
okay, because I was like, how do we get more?
So
days
like,
if
I
that
wanted to
happened?
add that because maybe when we get numbers back, we do find this is the first 5 years problem. And
Yeah.
for everybody else, you've been here long enough
For
that
the
it's
mo-
not an issue. So just something to think about if that's what the data shows. But if the data is showing more spread across years of experience, then that may not be a good solution. Okay, we are at 10:58.
Yeah,
I'm really proud of us. I actually
I
feel
think
like we
we
got a
got
lot
I
of
know,
work
that was
done.
We did some stuff.
With
not a lot of homework pieces.
Right. I will put together a joint statement today that has the collective commitment linked, has a high-level summary of our discussion today, and then when do we meet next?
Look at that, and I already forgot.
March.
Is it before or after spring break? It is before, on Monday,
Yeah,
March
it's the 4th at 1 to 4.
So then we just need to decide very quickly agenda for that, whether we want to bring back homework, and is that enough time to bring back homework on this issue, or do we want to move on to a district issue, and if so, what is that? Because I just want to make sure everyone's prepared for the next meeting.
The
so we-
next district issue I have down was late resignation.
was late resignation.
That's
Okay.
what I have. That doesn't mean that's right. That's just what I have.
Well, that's one, honestly, you guys, I mean, we all know sometimes we write these issue statements and have like pre-solutions.
Right.
I do not have one for that. It's just, there was a couple bumps in the road, and I also think we promised to review the data.
Mhm, we did, yep.
And so,
Agreed.
if everyone's cool with that, I can come prepared with some late resignation information and just sort of talk about our experience with that new provision this year. If you guys have experiences you want to share, let's talk about it. And then we can try and do the homework on this, on the things we've talked about, and see where we get and if we're ready to talk about that on Monday.
Well, and I
Not
had,
next
I
Monday, the Monday.
thought we had also down the District 403B, 457 retirement plans.
Which that is another one that we have already fleshed out. And so it may just be that we review our past meeting. Because everyone in here is listened, I think Dr. Schumacher gave a presentation on that.
Yeah.
So it'll be HR heavy, and I'll work with you, Dr. Higgins. Dr. Higgins will be a real invitee at our table next time.
Would Russ need to be available on that one as well?
Potentially, I'm gonna gather up a list of all the things, and if it's something that I feel like I can't adequately, or Dr. Higgins can't adequately talk about the cost, I'll invite him to come.
Okay.
And we'll remind Stephanie about our next meeting day. Thank you guys so much.
Of course.